Normandy, June 1944. The American infantry, pushing inland from the D-Day beaches, found their advance abruptly stalled, not by fortified bunkers or entrenched divisions, but by an innocuous-looking feature of the Norman countryside, the hedgerow. These dense earthen walls, crowned with thick brush and trees, appeared at first glance to be mere agricultural boundaries, yet they would soon prove to be formidable, blood-soaked obstacles, transforming every field into a killing zone and every hedgerow into a potential grave for the unsuspecting GIs. The seemingly benign landscape, carved by centuries of peasant farming, held a lethal secret, one that would unravel the conventional tactics of a modern army and force a brutal reevaluation of battlefield doctrine. Sergeant Frank Miller, a squad leader in the 29th Infantry Division, squinted at the next line of green just after 0800 hours, a mere 100 yards ahead of his position. His unit had landed on Omaha Beach just days prior, and the initial chaos of the landing had given way to a grinding, slow push through a patchwork quilt of small fields. To Miller, the hedgerows were simply overgrown fences, an inconvenience that broke up lines of sight and made vehicle movement difficult, but nothing that presented a significant tactical threat. His combat experience, forged in the open fields of Louisiana training grounds, had not prepared him for this unique terrain. The typical Norman hedgerow, known locally as a bocage, was not merely a row of shrubs. Damage reports later detailed their composition: an elevated bank of earth, often 2 to 5 feet high, sometimes 6, packed hard by generations of rain and cultivation, and frequently reinforced with stones. From this earthen base sprouted a dense entanglement of hawthorn, oak, ash, and elm, their roots binding the soil into an almost impenetrable mass. This natural barrier, often 8 to 10 feet thick at its base, presented a formidable physical challenge for infantry and an insurmountable one for early tanks. The American tactical doctrine, honed in desert warfare and open European plains simulations, emphasized rapid maneuver and overwhelming firepower across broad fronts. The hedgerows, however, fragmented the battlefield into countless small, isolated engagements, negating the advantages of superior numbers and artillery. Each field became a miniature theater of war, where visibility was severely limited and flanking movements were arduous and time-consuming. The expectation of swift progress dissolved into a brutal, yard-by-yard struggle, a stark contrast to the sweeping advances envisioned by planners. This seemingly benign agricultural feature, a product of centuries of land division, became a tactical labyrinth. The German defenders, intimately familiar with the terrain and having had weeks to prepare, quickly recognized the inherent defensive advantages offered by the bocage. They began to integrate the hedgerows into their defensive schemes, transforming them from mere obstacles into fortified positions. This adaptation, invisible to the advancing Americans, would soon manifest itself in devastating fashion, turning the tranquil Norman countryside into a killing ground of unprecedented efficiency. The first patrols, probing tentatively into the unfamiliar landscape, moved with a cautious optimism born of recent success. They were young men, many of them fresh from the beaches, their initial adrenaline still a dull hum beneath the surface of their fatigue, unaware of the quiet, patient eyes watching their every movement from within the dense green walls. The hedgerows, ancient and formidable, offered a deceptive promise of cover, their thick bases and interwoven branches appearing to be natural fortifications. Suddenly, without warning, the air tore, a sound unlike any they had yet encountered, a ripping canvas, a sustained, guttural roar that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the MG-42, a weapon designed for a singular purpose: to deliver an overwhelming volume of fire. Its rate of fire, documented in German ordnance reports as exceeding 1,200 rounds per minute, created a continuous stream of projectiles, a solid wall of lead that scythed through the soft American flesh and splintered the fragile wood of their M1 Garand. The initial bursts were devastatingly effective. A platoon of 30 men, advancing in a loose skirmish line, found themselves caught in an invisible vice. Damage reports from the 1st Infantry Division later detailed the grim arithmetic. Within the first 30 seconds of engagement, 12 men were dead or critically wounded, their bodies collapsing into the tall grass, their blood staining the verdant earth. The survivors, disoriented and terrified, instinctively sought cover, but the very hedgerows they had hoped would protect them now channeled the enemy's fire, creating deadly kill zones. The German machine gunners, often operating in two-man teams, had meticulously prepared their positions. They had dug shallow, camouflaged scrapes directly into the base of the hedgerows, sometimes even carving out small firing ports that allowed them to remain almost entirely concealed. Their fields of fire were carefully pre-sighted, often overlapping, ensuring that any advance along the narrow lanes or across the small fields would be met with an inescapable crossfire. This tactical foresight, coupled with the sheer destructive power of their primary weapon, transformed the seemingly benign agricultural landscape into a labyrinth of death. The American infantry, trained for open field engagements and urban combat, found their established tactics rendered obsolete. Their M1 Garands, while accurate and reliable, could not match the sustained suppressive fire of the MG-42. The logistical chain, designed to support rapid advances, now struggled to resupply units pinned down by unseen enemies. The psychological impact was profound. The invisible enemy, the relentless, terrifying sound, and the sudden, brutal loss of comrades fostered a deep sense of vulnerability and helplessness among the ranks. Each engagement became a brutal lesson in the unforgiving nature of this new battlefield. The hedgerows, once an afterthought, now loomed as impenetrable barriers, concealing death and dictating the pace and cost of every inch gained. The quiet, methodical German defense, built into the very fabric of the Norman countryside, had found its perfect instrument in the MG-42, transforming the bucolic landscape into a meat grinder. Normandy, June 1944. The initial American advance inland from the beaches met a landscape unlike any predicted by pre-invasion intelligence. The bocage, a dense tapestry of earthen banks topped with thick, intertwined vegetation, presented itself not as a series of minor obstacles but as a fundamental alteration of the battlefield. This was not the open country of maneuvers, nor the urban sprawl of European cities, but a labyrinth of natural fortifications. Each hedgerow, often 4 to 5 feet high and equally wide at its base, comprised ancient earthworks reinforced by decades of root growth from oak, ash, and hawthorn. These living walls, sometimes dating back centuries, were impenetrable to direct frontal assault by infantry and offered excellent concealment. The narrow, sunken lanes between them became killing zones, funneling attacking forces into predictable paths. German defenders, veterans of the Eastern Front, had quickly recognized the tactical value of this terrain. They integrated their defensive plans with the existing agricultural features, transforming the bocage into a series of mutually supporting strongpoints. Machine gun nests, often dug into the base of the hedgerows themselves, were virtually invisible until they opened fire. The MG-42 machine gun, with its blistering cyclic rate of up to 1,200 rounds per minute, became the keystone of this defense. A single burst, lasting mere seconds, could scythe through an entire American squad attempting to cross an open field or penetrate a hedgerow gap. Damage reports from early June indicate that in some sectors, over 60% of infantry casualties were attributed to machine gun fire. a stark deviation from expected artillery and mortar threats. The sheer volume of fire delivered by the MG-42, coupled with its distinctive high-pitched roar, had a profound psychological impact. Soldiers described the sound as a ripping canvas, an auditory signature of impending doom. The weapon's design, featuring a quick-change barrel, allowed sustained fire for extended periods, preventing any lull in the defensive barrage. American infantry, trained for fluid movement and combined arms assaults, found their tactics rendered obsolete by the bocage. Tanks, intended to spearhead advances, were largely confined to the narrow roads, making them vulnerable to anti-tank ambushes and unable to effectively support infantry struggling through the dense foliage. The hedgerows negated the numerical and technological advantages the Allies possessed. Each small field became a miniature fortress, each hedgerow a prepared trench line. German units, often small and highly mobile, could inflict disproportionate casualties from concealed positions, then withdraw to the next line of defense. The advance became a brutal yard-by-yard grind, measured in blood and expended ammunition, rather than miles. The realization dawned quickly. The hedgerows were not merely obstacles to be overcome, but an integral, hostile component of the battlefield, a weaponized landscape that favored the defender. This terrain demanded a complete rethinking of infantry tactics and equipment. The German doctrine, forged in the crucible of 2 world wars and honed by Blitzkrieg, emphasized a flexible defense, often leveraging natural obstacles to channel and break enemy assaults. In Normandy, the bocage provided a ready-made, intricate defensive labyrinth. The hedgerows, or bocage, were not merely overgrown fences. They were ancient earthen banks, often 3 to 5 feet high, topped with dense, thorny vegetation, sometimes reaching 15 feet in total height and width. These barriers, cultivated over centuries to delineate farmland, created a fragmented, claustrophobic battlefield, perfectly suited to a defensive posture designed to inflict maximum attrition. Within this terrain, the German infantry, often outnumbered and outgunned in the larger strategic picture, understood the critical importance of observation and fields of fire. They did not simply occupy the hedgerows, they integrated themselves into them. Small, camouflaged firing positions were excavated into the banks, often just large enough for a single machine gun team, sometimes reinforced with timber or rock. These positions were not static. They were part of a larger interlocking system designed for mutual support and overlapping arcs of fire. The German soldier, trained to fight defensively with ingenuity, exploited every fold in the ground, every shadow, every gap in the foliage. The MG-42, with its blistering cyclic rate of 1,200 rounds per minute, was the linchpin of this defensive strategy. Its sound alone, a tearing canvas, was psychologically devastating. Production logs from 1943 indicate a monthly output of over 12,000 units, ensuring its widespread deployment across the Western Front. When emplaced within the bocage, its rapid fire could saturate a narrow corridor, effectively turning a hedgerow gap or a sunken lane into a killing zone. The weapon's quick-change barrel system, requiring only seconds to swap out an overheated barrel, allowed for sustained suppressive fire, a critical factor in repelling successive waves of infantry. The tactical genius lay in the Germans' understanding of the American approach. Allied forces, accustomed to more open terrain and rapid advances, initially underestimated the bocage. Their doctrine favored overwhelming firepower and maneuver, but the hedgerows negated much of this advantage, forcing them into piecemeal attacks down narrow lanes. The German defenders, often with a clear view of these approaches, allowed American units to commit to the attack before unleashing a sudden, concentrated torrent of fire from unseen positions. This created a meat grinder, where American platoons and companies were cut down before they could effectively deploy or return fire. Interrogation files from captured German non-commissioned officers consistently reveal a common understanding. The The hedgerows were their allies. They provided concealment, protection, and the ability to dictate the terms of engagement. The MG-42, with its terrifying efficiency, transformed these natural barriers into instruments of mass destruction. The American infantry, moving through unfamiliar and treacherous ground, often found themselves exposed and vulnerable, their advance stalled by an invisible enemy whose firepower was both relentless and precise. Recommendation: exploit terrain. The initial optimism of rapid advance had curdled into a grim acknowledgement of the terrain's lethal embrace. American infantry, trained for open field maneuvers and urban assaults, found their conventional tactics dissolving in the face of an enemy that seemed to materialize from the very earth itself. The hedgerows, those ancient, tangled barriers of earth and root, became fortified bastions, each one a potential ambush point, each one a riddle to be solved under fire. Casualty reports from the first weeks of engagement in the Bocage country painted a stark picture. A typical company, entering a sector expected to be lightly defended, might lose a third of its strength in a single afternoon attempting to clear a mere 200 yards of hedgerow. The medical aid stations, initially prepared for conventional wound patterns, were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of high-velocity bullet trauma. Often multiple hits from sustained automatic fire. The M1 Garand, the standard rifle of the American infantryman, with its 8-round en-bloc clip, was a weapon designed for precision and disciplined fire control. Its rate of fire, approximately 40 to 50 rounds per minute in sustained combat, was a testament to its robust gas-operated system and effective semi-automatic action. However, this rate was fundamentally outmatched by the German machine guns. The MG-42, with its roller-locked short recoil operation, could achieve a cyclic rate of fire between 1,200 and 1,500 rounds per minute, a blistering torrent of steel that earned it the moniker Hitler's buzzsaw. This mechanical advantage translated directly into battlefield dominance within the close confines of the Bocage. A single, well-sighted MG-42, firing in short, controlled bursts, could lay down a wall of fire that no infantry assault, however determined, could hope to penetrate without catastrophic losses. The psychological toll was immense. The unseen enemy, the sudden, deafening roar of a machine gun opening fire from a few yards away, the inability to effectively suppress a target that was almost perfectly camouflaged. These factors eroded morale. The very landscape, once seen as merely an obstacle, became an active participant in the German defense, a labyrinth designed to channel and destroy. Command recognized the systemic failure of existing doctrine. The infantry's primary tools for breaching such defenses were often limited to hand grenades and rifle fire, supplemented by occasional artillery support that struggled with pinpoint accuracy against concealed positions. Tanks, designed for breakthrough, found their mobility severely restricted by the sunken lanes and thick embankments, often presenting their vulnerable undersides or flanks as they attempted to maneuver. The Germans, understanding the tactical implications of their MG-42s, deployed them in mutually supporting positions, often with overlapping fields of fire that created deadly kill zones. Each hedgerow became a miniature fortress, its defenders prepared to fight from concealed positions until the last possible moment, then withdrawing to the next prepared line. This attrition, measured in American lives and stalled advances, highlighted a profound mismatch between expectation and reality. Normandy, July 1944. The relentless attrition in the Bocage forced a re-evaluation of tactics and equipment. American armored units, particularly the M4 Sherman tanks, found themselves utterly unsuited for the close-quarters, confined lanes between the earthworks. Their main guns, designed for open-field engagements against enemy armor, were largely ineffective against deeply dug-in infantry positions concealed within the dense foliage. The tanks themselves became vulnerable, their thin side armor exposed as they attempted to traverse the embankments, often silhouetted against the sky for German anti-tank gunners. The immediate problem was physical penetration. Tanks could not easily breach the thick, ancient hedgerows without exposing their vulnerable underbellies or becoming entangled. Standard bulldozer blades proved too slow and cumbersome, often requiring multiple passes and drawing intense enemy fire. The need for a rapid, tank-mounted hedgerow cutting device became acutely apparent. Field modifications began almost immediately, born of desperation and battlefield ingenuity. One of the earliest and most effective solutions emerged from Sergeant Curtis G. Cullen, Jr. of the 2nd Armored Division. His concept involved welding steel teeth, often scavenged from German Rommel's asparagus, anti-landing obstacles, or scrap iron to the front of Sherman tanks. These crude but effective prongs, sometimes referred to as rhinoceros attachments, allowed the tanks to rip through the base of the hedgerows, creating a breach wide enough for infantry to follow through quickly. Initial field tests of Cullen's device were conducted in late July 1944. Damage reports from these trials indicated a significant reduction in time required to breach a typical hedgerow, from several minutes of vulnerable maneuvering to under 30 seconds. The ability to create multiple breaches along the front simultaneously disoriented German defenders, who relied on the linear nature of the bocage for their defensive lines. Production logs show that by early August, hundreds of these kits were being fabricated in divisional workshops and forward repair depots, often using salvaged materials. The rhinoceros modification, while simple in design, had profound tactical implications. It restored a degree of mobility to American armor in the bocage, allowing tanks to support infantry more effectively and to bypass well-sighted German strongpoints. No longer were advances confined to narrow lanes or exposed crossroads. The ability to create new avenues of attack disrupted German defensive patterns and reduced the effectiveness of their pre-registered artillery and machine gun fire. This innovation, born of necessity, began to turn the tide in the hedgerow country. Normandy, July 1944. The American infantry, stalled for weeks, faced an increasingly desperate situation. Their initial assumptions about the hedgerows, viewed as mere agricultural boundaries, had proven catastrophically wrong. Each linear obstruction, often a tangled mass of earth, stone, and ancient growth, concealed a network of German defensive positions, funneling attacking forces into killing zones where MG-42s, expertly camouflaged, inflicted devastating casualties with their sustained high-volume fire. The M4 Sherman tank, the primary armored support, found itself largely ineffective against these entrenched positions. Its relatively high silhouette and limited gun depression made it a poor tool for engaging targets hidden behind earthen banks. Attempting to simply push through the hedgerows often resulted in tanks exposing their vulnerable undersides or becoming entangled, presenting static targets for German anti-tank teams. Damage reports from early July indicated a disproportionate number of tank losses to concealed Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck attacks, often occurring at ranges under 50 meters. The infantry, without adequate armored support or specialized tools, resorted to costly piecemeal assaults. Platoons and companies would attempt to breach a single hedgerow, often under intense machine gun and mortar fire, suffering heavy losses for minimal gains. Unit diaries from the 29th Infantry Division described engagements where companies were reduced by 30% in a single day's fighting for control of a few hundred yards of bocage. The sheer density of these linear obstacles, sometimes 4 or 5 per kilometer, created a labyrinthine battlefield that negated American numerical and technological advantages in open warfare. When it finally began to materialize, was not a single grand offensive, but a series of incremental adaptations born of battlefield necessity. The most significant of these was the development of specialized hedgerow breaching devices. Initial attempts involved attaching sharpened steel prongs, salvaged from German obstacles or fabricated in field workshops, to the front of Sherman tanks. These crude but effective modifications allowed tanks to physically tear through the dense hedgerows, creating narrow passages for infantry. The Rhino modification, as it became known, involved welding 4 steel tusks, typically cut from German beach obstacles, to the front of a Sherman. This improvisation, credited to Sergeant Curtis G. Coolin, Jr. of the 2nd Armored Division, transformed the tank's role from an indirect fire platform or open-field assault vehicle into a direct breaching tool. Production logs from maintenance units in late July show hundreds of these modifications being applied, with a reported conversion rate of approximately 70 tanks per day across various divisions. With the Rhino tanks leading, infantry could now follow directly behind, exploiting the newly created breaches and engaging German positions from the flank or rear before the MG-42 crews could reposition. This tactic, while still hazardous, significantly reduced the exposure time for attacking infantry and allowed for a more coordinated advance. The psychological impact on German defenders, who had come to rely on the hedgerows as impenetrable barriers, was also considerable, as their carefully prepared fields of fire were suddenly rendered obsolete by the grinding advance of the modified Shermans. Accompanying these mechanical innovations were refined infantry tactics. Small, highly trained assault teams, often supported by flamethrowers and demolition charges, would precede the main advance, tasked with neutralizing specific strongpoints. Intelligence derived from captured German soldiers and aerial reconnaissance began to provide a clearer picture of the interconnected nature of the German defenses, allowing for more targeted attacks rather than blind assaults. This combined arms approach, integrating specialized armor with focused infantry action, slowly began to unravel the German defensive web, though each gain remained hard-won and costly. Normandy, 1944. The hedgerow fighting, a brutal education in close-quarters combat, profoundly reshaped American military doctrine. The initial underestimation of these seemingly innocuous natural barriers led to devastating casualties, forcing a rapid, often improvised, adaptation to a terrain unlike any encountered in prior European campaigns. This experience highlighted critical deficiencies in pre-war training and intelligence gathering regarding specific operational environments. The immediate tactical adjustments, such as the development of hedgerow breaching devices like the Coolin hedgerow cutter, were direct responses to the MG-42's lethal effectiveness from concealed positions. Beyond these mechanical innovations, the psychological toll of fighting in such constricted, unforgiving landscapes fostered a new appreciation for the importance of decentralized command and initiative at the squad and platoon level. Standardized infantry tactics designed for open field engagements or urban combat proved inadequate against an enemy expertly exploiting natural cover. Post-war analysis, codified in revised field manuals and training curricula, emphasized detailed terrain reconnaissance and the development of specialized breaching techniques for similar obstacles. The lessons learned in the bocage influenced the design parameters for future armored vehicles, prioritizing improved protection against close-range anti-tank weapons and greater maneuverability in confined spaces. Furthermore, the sheer volume of small arms fire sustained in these engagements underscored the necessity for enhanced individual soldier protection, leading to ongoing research into improved body armor and helmet designs. The strategic implications extended to intelligence operations, with a renewed focus on comprehensive topographical analysis and the anticipation of environmental challenges in future theaters of operation. Interrogation files from captured German soldiers often revealed their surprise at the American forces' initial unpreparedness for the hedgerows, a vulnerability they exploited with ruthless efficiency. This intelligence gap became a case study in the critical role of pre-invasion environmental assessment, moving beyond mere map studies to include detailed ground-level analysis. The enduring image of American infantry struggling through the bocage, often at a numerical disadvantage in terms of effective firepower due to concealment, became a somber reminder of the cost of underestimating the battlefield's physical characteristics. The experience underscored that even a technologically superior force could be critically hobbled by a failure to adapt to local conditions. Unit diaries frequently recorded the frustration and fear induced by the unseen enemy, often only revealed by the sudden, tearing sound of the MG-42. This hard-won knowledge permanently altered the approach to combined arms operations, emphasizing the integral role of engineering and specialized equipment in overcoming natural obstacles that could otherwise negate air superiority or tank advantages. The engagement statistics, meticulously compiled from after-action reports, showed a disproportionate number of casualties sustained in the early weeks of the Hedgerow fighting, a stark indicator of the learning curve. The subsequent reduction in these figures, following the widespread adoption of breaching devices and revised tactics, provided empirical evidence of successful adaptation. The legacy of the hedgerows also manifested in the psychological preparation of troops for future conflicts, instilling a greater respect for the ingenuity of a defending force utilizing terrain to its maximum advantage. The development of specialized training areas, replicating complex natural environments, became a standard component of infantry preparation. The logistical challenges of supplying and supporting troops in such fragmented terrain also led to innovations in forward supply chain management and casualty evacuation procedures. The quiet reflection on the Hedgerow battles solidified the understanding that victory often hinged not just on overwhelming force, but on the meticulous study and mastery of the ground itself. The MG-42, with its 1,200 rounds per minute cyclic rate, served as a brutal tutor, forcing an evolution in American military